one author, a translator of Ashtavakra, in his beautiful introduction, he says, after all the philosophers and poets and scriptures and prophets and they've all sages have fallen silent, Ashtavakra begins. The words, he says, the words are so luminous, they seem to appear on the paper and disappear into awareness afterwards. So he says, Akriyaha, changeless, Ekaha, one consciousness. In all beings, not separate consciousnesses. So here is the huge difference between Advaita Vedanta and Sankhya. Ancient difference. The Sankhya philosophy, the first philosophers of the world. Swami Vivekananda says, Kapila is the first philosopher of the human race. He said, many consciousnesses, Bahupurusha. Why not? There are so many beings, each of us is a separate consciousness. Why? Why do you say there are different consciousnesses? Well, how else, the Sankhyan says, how else would you explain? The birth of one is not the birth of everybody. When one person dies, thankfully everybody does not die. But we immediately will reply, but that's the birth of the body. That's the death of the body. It's not even the birth of the mind or the death of the mind. The subtle body continues from lifetime to lifetime, let alone consciousness. Well, the Sankhyan will say, you're right, but what about something conscious, like waking and sleeping? When one person is awake, everybody should be awake. When one person falls asleep, everybody should fall asleep if we are all one consciousness. Thank God that's not the case. Otherwise, it would be a disaster in Vedanta classes. There's inevitably somebody who's sleeping. And if everybody falls asleep, it would be a disaster. But again, the answer from the Vedantic perspective is simple. Waking, dreaming, deep sleep. These we may use the term conscious, unconscious. But basically, these are states of the mind, not of consciousness. It's the mind which wakes up. It's the mind which becomes restless, the mind which becomes tired, the mind which goes to sleep, the mind which dreams. And all of this is revealed by consciousness. Why are you saying consciousness wakes up, consciousness dreams, or consciousness sleeps? No. So the sleeping of one is not the sleeping of all. Well, the Sankhyan would say, well, what about enlightenment? You realize, in Vedanta or in Sankhya, you realize I'm pure consciousness. If one consciousness realized that, all would realize if we're all one. Unfortunately, that does not happen. If my guru realizes, becomes enlightened, does not mean that I become enlightened. So we must be separate consciousnesses. It seems to be a clincher. No, not even that. Vedanta says your ignorance and enlightenment, seeing and not seeing, getting it and not getting, waking up, and in terms of enlightenment, waking up, is in the mind again. Consciousness is never in ignorance. Consciousness is never enlightened. Consciousness is beyond both ignorance and enlightenment. Enlightenment and ignorance are in the realm of Maya. Why are we attributing it to consciousness? So, how will you distinguish one consciousness from another? See, it's not all that difficult. You can distinguish bodies. You can count. Right here you can count how many bodies there are. 70, 75, 80 people. You can even distinguish minds. You talk to people, you will get different responses, different views. An opinion poll will give different opinions, showing that we have different minds. You can't physically count the minds, but by a survey, you can easily see minds in the bodies are working differently. But apart from the body and the mind, if you think of consciousness in itself, you see it's a homogeneous reality. Where will you partition consciousness? On what basis will you? It feels like we are different consciousnesses because we have a strong body rooting. We are standing in the body. That's why it feels separate. Stand in consciousness. One step. Stand in the mind. You will find that all bodies are in the mind. In your thoughts only, in your thinking, you have your own body and other people also. Go one step back into consciousness itself. You will find all bodies and minds are appearances in consciousness. How will you distinguish one consciousness from another consciousness? In the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna says to Arjuna, Kshetragyam chapi mam vidhi sarva kshetreshu bharata. O Arjuna, know me alone to be the one consciousness in all the fields. He calls all these bodies fields. And the one who knows the field in that body, you know your own body, and through that the external world, you are the knower of the field, kshetragya. And immediately we feel, oh, so many fields, so many bodies, so many knowers of the body. Immediately Krishna says, no. Ultimately, if you investigate, there is only one knower of the body. And I, Krishna, am the knower of the body. Here is the Vedantic idea of God. The Vedantic idea of God is that one consciousness in all bodies and minds. The one consciousness associated with the entire cosmic mind, the entire cosmic body. The Virat and the Hiranyagarbha, the one consciousness behind that is Ishvara, God. All of this packed into one little word by Ashtavakra, Ekaha, one. There is, in Benares, if you go to Trailanga Swami's, the little place where, so there's a picture of Sri Ramakrishna meeting Trailanga Swami. I think must be a painting, obviously. There's no photograph there. And Trailanga Swami was Mauna at that time. He lived for more than 200 years, nearly 300 years actually. And Sri Ramakrishna met him. So Sri Ramakrishna in the picture is shown as asking him, is it two or is it one? He's also using sign language. And Trailanga Swami is showing it's one. I remember once, I was a novice, a brahmachari, in our ashram in Deoghar. We're sitting down for dinner with the monks and the students. And there would be a trolley with a big cauldron, and there's a cook who will be distributing chapatis. And I was talking to a friend of mine, another novice, telling him this story. Sri Ramakrishna is asking two or one, and Trailanga Swami says one. And this person was passing by him. He gave me one chapati and went. I wanted two. But it's too late because he's moving very fast. The philosopher Arindam Chakravarti told me that many, many decades ago, he met Anandamayima. Anandamayima, who's a very well-known mystic in north of India those days. But the thing you would know about her is, the impression one gets is she's a pure devotee of Krishna. And the professor told me, if you talk to her, she was true and a non-dualist, Advaitin. In a very devotional, simple language, she said to them, to this young man, others who had come, in Bengali, Duniya to Duniya, Baba. Duniya, the word which is used for the world, samsara, in Bengali, Hindi, and some other languages also, Duniya. She made a play on that. It's taking, du means two. The moment you have two, you have samsara, you have the world. Without the two, there's only God. Ekaha. What about this world? We have one consciousness, fine, even if we accept that. But that one consciousness is aware of a world. Did you not distinguish between consciousness and its objects? So I am consciousness, fine. But what about this world? Where did all of this come from? Cars and buildings and people and animals and stars and quasars and quarks and protons. Where did all of this come from? Ashtavakra says, Vibhu. Vibhu, normally the word Vibhu means all-pervading. That's how it's translated. In this case, Vivattam bhavati Vibhu. I'll move a little fast here. The two ways of interpreting it. Vividham bhavati Vibhu. That one reality has become many. But how does consciousness become many? The only way that one consciousness can be many is appear as many to itself. Yesterday I saw a wonderful ritual. We had a 6-hour puja yesterday for the establishment of the Jagannath deities. A 6-hour puja in the Houston heat outside. Not in the air conditioning, in the Houston heat outside, 6-hour puja. But I saw many subtle aspects of the puja. So when the deities are finally consecrated, and the first thing, so there's a cloth which finally binds the eyes of the deity, and after certain rituals, the cloth is removed. The first thing that the deity sees, a mirror is brought before the deity. This deity sees it. God sees God. Such a beautiful and Advaitic insight in there. Vibhuhu, I alone appear as the many. I, not Sarvapriyananda, not this fellow in the body-mind. I, that one consciousness, Sakshi, Ekaha, one in all beings. I alone appear as many, and I'm seeing myself. This is the universe, is the mirror in which God is seeing God. Vibhu, vivartam bhavati. What is the technical meaning of this vivartam bhavati? Just a slight technical note here. The word vivarta is very interesting. This is what distinguishes, at this point, Advaita Vedanta is distinguished from all the other schools. Vivarta means appearance without changing. So milk, for example, changes into yogurt and ice cream and all the other milk products. It really changes. Something's going on there. It changes. But for example, the movie screen doesn't change into the movie characters and the cars and the villain and the hero and the car chase. None of that. The movie screen has not changed into those things. It appears without changing. The classic example of a rope appearing as a snake. Somebody saw a snake, somebody saw a discarded garland, somebody saw a crack in the ground. It was a rope all along. The rope did not become a snake or a garland or a crack in the ground. It appeared by error, by mistake, by whatever reason, without changing. If something appears as something else, that is called vivarta. And Advaita Vedanta holds that this one consciousness is appearing to itself as the universe. All of this is nothing other than you. You are looking at yourself. You are the deity looking at yourself in the mirror. And what do you see? A universe and people and a body and a mind. And without knowing and without not seeing, without inquiry, what do you become? I am this body and mind interacting with this world. I become small. One of our great Swamis in the past, Swami Sarvapriyanandaji, in one place he says, this entire universe, this world is presented to me at once, including this body and mind. Either all of it I am, or none of it I am. Either I am this mind, this body, like every one of us, we feel that, but also every body and mind in the universe. Or none of it. I am just the pure consciousness. Our mistake is we flow into this body and mind and we think about it, this much I am, up to the limit of the skin, and outside the skin, other. Duniya.